The war had raged for over a decade before Earth even knew it existed. Across distant galaxies, species with fleets larger than continents clashed for dominance, resources, and survival. And in all of it, Earth remained a silent dot in the dark, uninvited and unnoticed. We had our problems, our wars, our politics, our hunger for power. But nothing compared to what was unfolding beyond the stars. Earth didn't have interstellar ships or wormhole beacons. What we had were satellites, debris-filled orbits, and half-broken peace treaties. We were primitive by galactic standards, and we were glad to stay that way. But they came anyway. It wasn't a grand invasion. No declaration, no planet-shaking weaponry. Just a scout ship, sleek, black, and arrogant. It hovered above the Mojave Desert like a vulture over a dying beast. No one knew where it came from. NORAD scrambled jets, but before they even got close, the ship sent a message. Not in peace, not in curiosity, but in dominance. It broadcasted a single word, translated through our primitive comms. Observe. And then it started hunting. It began with a convoy, military, no less. Disappeared. Melted down to twisted steel. Then a small town outside Vegas. 47 missing, houses burned black. No explanation. The government locked it down, buried it under media noise. But I knew. I was there. My name is Cole Maddox, former Special Forces, now wasting time with contract security jobs and a daily whiskey hangover. I saw the aftermath in that desert. They pulled me in because of my clearance, gave me a flashlight, and told me to record and report. What I saw wasn't just slaughter. It was testing, like we were rats in a maze. The bodies weren't torn apart by explosives or bullets. They were dissected, surgically removed limbs, brains missing, some still twitching. I puked behind a Humvee and kept my mouth shut. But inside, something cracked. The government tried talking to the ship, sent a message through every satellite, every frequency. We are not involved in your war. We wish for peace. The ship replied by vaporizing an entire Ranger battalion outside Barstow. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't about war. This was about ego, arrogance. We didn't kneel, so they kicked us. And Earth? Earth was still refusing to act, debating in underground bunkers while more people disappeared. Scientists tried reverse engineering what tech they could. Politicians stalled. The president gave a vague speech about unexpected contact. I couldn't sleep. Faces haunted me. The woman whose chest was opened like a cadaver. The kid's arm fused with his own iPad. The smell of it all. And the worst part? Knowing they'd get away with it. That the rest of the galaxy probably didn't care. We were nothing to them. But that was their mistake, because humans, we have a limit. You push long enough, and we don't just push back. We burn your empire down, and they chose the wrong enemy. The days that followed were a slow descent into chaos. Silent, controlled, and absolutely intentional. The alien vessel, still unidentified, didn't move from its hovering position over Mojave. It didn't need to. Every few nights it would descend, quiet as fog, take what it wanted, and disappear before our best pilots even caught radar echoes. Each time, it left a mess that screamed more of warning than warfare. Families gone, entire mobile units wiped clean, buildings with their walls peeled like fruit. And yet, Washington hesitated. They still called it an incident, not an attack. But not all of us were content to wait for signatures and clearance. Some of us had seen enough. Some of us remembered the days when waiting got people killed. They called us washed up, mercenaries, veterans too broken for real duty. But we had something these suits didn't. Clarity. We knew what needed to be done. It started in a garage. A literal goddamn garage in Albuquerque, New Mexico. A former CIA spook named Lancer, real name unknown, and that's how he liked it, gathered a few of us, old friends from wars that never made the news. I brought my contact in experimental weaponry, a twitchy genius named Grant, who once built a drone swarm that could strip the flesh off a cow in under a minute. Our mission was unofficial, off the books, a whisper among shadows. Find out what this ship was doing. Learn its weaknesses. Hit it hard and fast. We weren't going to win a war. We were going to send a message. The first recon mission was suicide. Plain and simple. But I volunteered. I had to. Something about standing idle while that thing hovered over our soil made my blood boil. I wanted it to know we weren't prey. We used a jerry-rigged stealth chopper coated with homemade EM-disrupting nanofilm, something Grant cooked up in his shed. It wasn't perfect, but it would buy us a few minutes before the ship's sensors picked us up. The moment we lifted off, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose, rage wrapped in discipline. We flew low, under radar, crossing the desert in silence. As we approached, the ship came into view, massive and quiet, like a city-sized spider suspended in the air. There were no lights, no markings, just a smooth, reflective surface and a humming resonance that made your teeth itch. I landed a mile out and continued on foot, crawling over rocks, clutching a modified EM disruptor pack. I didn't plan to destroy the thing, yet. I wanted data, weak spots, anything. What I found wasn't what I expected. Beneath the ship, a hatch was open, not gaping or careless, but open, like it wanted me to come in. So I did. I entered the belly of the alien beast with nothing but a sidearm, a knife, and a bone-deep need for answers. The interior was blinding. White light, seamless walls, air that smelled sterile and wrong. And then I saw them. Humans, alive, suspended in glass chambers like trophies, eyes moving, mouths open, some banging silently on the walls, dozens of them. Soldiers, civilians, children. My throat locked. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would alert the ship. I placed the EM disruptor near the console and backed away. Then something moved. It was the size of a human, maybe taller, but its body bent in impossible ways. Its skin shimmered like oil on water. No mouth, no eyes, just a vertical slit down the face that opened when it sensed me. It didn't attack. It studied me. I raised my gun. It didn't flinch. And then it spoke, not in sound, but directly into my mind, a raw, guttural voice that made me stagger. Not yours, not war, observation, response to resistance. I gritted my teeth. You took innocent people. Non-combatants tested, potential assessed, Earth response insufficient. That was all I needed. I hit the detonator. The explosion was small by design, but enough to fry local systems. Lights flickered. The chambers cracked. Alarms, if that's what they were, echoed in waves of vibrating air. I ran. I didn't make it far before the ship reacted. A blast of kinetic energy hit the ground behind me, launching sand and rock into the air. But I was already rolling behind a dune, bleeding, deafened, but alive. I made it back to the chopper with half my ribs bruised and Grant screaming in my earpiece. Whatever you did, it worked. It's retreating, rising fast. The ship ascended, now visibly unstable. Something I triggered must have disrupted its systems. It didn't disappear into orbit. No, it limped. That was a win. A small one. By the time I was debriefed back at the compound, the video had gone viral. Someone on our side leaked drone footage. The world saw the ship stagger. They saw the alien tech. They saw the abducted civilians. And suddenly, the game changed. Earth couldn't stay neutral anymore. The United Nations held an emergency assembly. For the first time in history, all the bickering, useless noise fell silent. We had a common enemy now. They called it the Dominion, an empire that spanned multiple systems, known for testing new planets the way a butcher tests meat. Earth, it seemed, was their latest curiosity. But now they knew we could bleed them. And Earth? Earth decided it was time to make them fear us. Funding poured into black projects overnight. DARPA, NATO, even the Chinese and Russians opened their vaults. Old Cold War enemies shook hands over schematics. Hackers were given clearances. Convicts were conscripted. Every genius with a grudge was handed a lab. And men like me? We were given command. I led the first sanctioned strike team under Project Goliath, Earth's response program. We weren't building space fleets, not yet. We were building weapons. Dirty, clever, human weapons. Viruses tailored to alien DNA. Pulse bombs tuned to frequencies we barely understood. Armor that used smart fabric to mimic invisibility. And while the world watched from behind their screens, my team prepared for the next encounter. Because the Dominion wasn't done. 1 month later, they returned. Not just a scout ship. 5 carriers. They didn't hover this time. They attacked openly. New York was the first hit. They didn't even need to destroy buildings. They targeted the grid, shut down everything. Then they released hunters, 4-legged metallic creatures that moved like nightmares. Streets turned red. But they didn't expect the counterstrike. We were waiting. My team used rooftop launchers to rain down sound-based disruptors. EMP traps buried in manholes fried their sensors. Civilians, armed by hastily formed militias, took to the streets. Chaos, yes, but controlled chaos. And for every one of us that fell, 5 of them dropped. Humanity has always been ugly in war. We cheat, we improvise, we survive. By the end of day 3, 2 of their ships were down. One crashed into the Atlantic, still burning. Another exploded mid-air when one of Grant's virus payload drones slipped through a shield crack. But the cost was high. Over 100,000 dead. I stood in the rubble of Times Square, face smeared with ash and blood, and realized we were in the war now, like it or not. But more than that, we weren't alone anymore. The galaxy had watched us bleed and do nothing. Now they were watching us fight. And somewhere out there, the Dominion would be wondering how their simple observation mission had turned into a planetary insurgency. They should have left us alone. But they chose the wrong species to provoke. They wanted to test our potential. Fine. Let's show them what happens when Earth stops being polite and starts getting dangerous. The fires in New York still hadn't gone out when the real planning began. The world had changed. Overnight, the Dominion didn't just wake a sleeping planet, they poked a nest of wolves. For years we fought among ourselves, warring over lines on a map and ideologies that meant nothing in the vast stretch of the universe. Now none of that mattered. The enemy was clear, and I was going to make sure they bled for what they did. Project Goliath moved into Phase 2. Retaliation. It wasn't a question of if anymore, it was how soon. Earth's resources, once shackled by bureaucracy and political grandstanding, now flowed freely. The military-industrial complex didn't need permission. It had a mandate from a wounded world. We built a fleet, crude by galactic standards, but terrifying by ours. We weren't trying to match the Dominion ship for ship. We weren't interested in diplomacy or deterrence. Our ships didn't have creature comforts or advanced shield systems. They were steel coffins packed with weapons and rage. And I was handed command of the first interstellar assault team. 30 men and women, hand-picked. No uniforms, no ranks, just killers, specialists, outcasts, and the kind of warriors who didn't ask why, only when. We called ourselves the Hounds. Our target was a Dominion forward outpost located on a moon in the Carzul system. Intel came from intercepted signals and some quiet whispers from a Black Ops lab that managed to crack alien language in record time. The outpost was a logistics hub, not heavily defended but critical. If we could take it out, it would cripple their ability to operate in our sector. The trip there was short, 2 weeks through a makeshift wormhole corridor built using salvaged alien tech, and way too much risk. The ship barely held together. Every hour, something sparked or rattled, and we took turns betting which part would fail first. But we made it. The moon was a desolate rock, jagged, frozen, and howling with winds that didn't care about your armor. We didn't land. We dropped. High atmosphere insertion, old school, no shields, just heat-resistant pods and nerves of steel. The moment I hit ground, I felt it. That old thrill. Combat clarity. My pulse slowed. My thoughts sharpened. The hounds regrouped within minutes, moving like shadows across the ice. The Dominion never expected an attack on their own turf. That was their mistake. Their outpost was a towering monolith, black, sharp-edged, and humming with energy. Alien patrols moved with mechanical precision, their gait stiff and arrogant. We studied them for 12 hours. No rush. Every movement recorded, every pattern learned. Human patience, human instinct, something they hadn't calculated for. And then, at 0400 hours, we struck. Explosives set in the ventilation ports. Snipers took out the sentries with reverse-engineered railguns. My second-in-command, Briggs, a mountain of a man with eyes like a dead shark, breached the main entrance with a shaped charge that left a hole the size of a truck. Inside, it was chaos. Dominion forces scrambled, disoriented. Their response protocols were too slow. We were already in. Already killing. I moved like I was born for this. Clearing hallways, checking corners, watching my team work like clockwork. These weren't rookies. These were survivors. Every one of them had lost something back on Earth. We reached the core within 15 minutes. The heart of the outpost pulsed with alien energy, blue and violent. Grant, patched in via uplink, guided me through the sabotage sequence. "This is going to overload their entire power matrix," he said. "But once you hit it, you'll have 5 minutes, maybe less." That's all I needed. I set the charges. One by one, they blinked red, armed. Final. As we pulled back, one of the Dominion elites finally showed up. Taller, armored, different, smarter. It moved like a blade through the air and cut down 2 of my men before I could blink. I faced it head on. We didn't exchange words. No taunts, no speeches, just fury. It fought like nothing I'd ever seen. Adaptive, brutal. But I had one advantage it didn't. I wanted to die if it meant killing it. That's a mindset aliens never understand. I took its head off with a high-velocity burst from a repurposed energy rifle and didn't stop firing until there was nothing left but twitching limbs. We escaped through the secondary tunnel system just as the outpost exploded. The shockwave threw us to the ground, but we got up laughing. We had done it. The Dominion bled on its own soil, and now it knew we weren't going to play defense anymore. When we returned, Earth treated us like heroes, but we didn't feel like heroes. We felt like men with blood still on our hands and ghosts on our backs. I didn't celebrate. I didn't speak at press conferences or pose for photos. I went to the base hospital and sat with Briggs, who lost half his face and still killed more than any of us. He grinned through the pain. "We ain't supposed to win, Cole," he said. "But damned if we don't keep trying." I nodded. He was right. And the best part? The universe was watching now. Not just the Dominion. Other species. Silent observers who once saw Earth as a primitive speck were now looking at us differently. A few made contact. Cautious, encrypted, indirect. They offered alliances. And while the politicians debated the long-term implications, the rest of us focused on one thing: the next target. The Dominion hadn't even begun to understand what they unleashed. They thought humanity would cower, would kneel. But they forgot what happens when cornered animals bite back. We weren't trying to be conquerors. We were trying to make sure no human child would ever wake up screaming under alien lights again. And if that meant burning half the galaxy down, so be it. After the Carzul strike, the Dominion fell silent. For a week, there were no retaliatory attacks, no threats, no surveillance drones above our atmosphere. Nothing. But silence in war isn't peace. It's preparation. We all knew it. While the media screamed about Earth's first great victory, I sat in the debriefing room, staring at the holomap, watching red dots scatter across the stars. Those weren't friendly signals. Those were Dominion fleets regrouping, shifting tactics, maybe even deciding how much of a threat we really were. But there was something else, something we hadn't expected. Other species started to make contact. Not open broadcasts, not diplomatic envoys, no fanfare or peace songs, just encrypted transmissions routed through backdoor Earth satellites, intercepted by the Black Ops guys running Project Goliath. They called themselves observers, collectors, seers, neutral names to avoid suspicion. I got pulled into a meeting at Site 14, buried beneath the Norwegian mountains. Cold air, steel walls, and nothing but classified silence. Lancer was already there. The old ghost looked worse than ever, pale and coughing, but his mind was still lethal. "You've drawn eyes," he rasped, flicking the holotable. "Some are curious, some not so much." "What do they want?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned on the audio of one transmission. The voice wasn't human. Too clear, too smooth, like it was grown in a lab. "Human War Prince, we witnessed your fire on Carzul. The Dominion bleeds. This interests us. Contact requested. Neutral ground." The term War Prince pissed me off, but it also told me something. They didn't understand us. They still thought we operated like empires, like savages crowned in blood. Maybe they weren't so wrong. The message came from a species called the Ithac, semi-organic, long-lived beings that survived by trading secrets. They were known to the Dominion, tolerated because they never took sides. They gathered data like a virus, watching civilizations rise and fall, and selling intel to the highest bidder. Now they were watching us. Lancer leaned forward, his voice dry as stone. "You're going. Alone." I laughed. "You serious?" "They won't talk to suits. They want blood on the hands, not medals on the chest. That's you." 2 days later, I stood inside a transport pod so small I had to kneel. It launched through a narrow wormhole corridor to a moon called Zel-Oth, a dead place orbiting a dying sun. The Ithac ship waited for me on the surface. It didn't look like a ship, more like a cyst, pulsing gently, almost alive. As I approached, it opened like a wound. Inside, it was warm. Too warm. I couldn't see the walls, just shifting light like breathing skin. No weapons, no guards, just a voice. "We see you, Cole Maddox." I froze. "Didn't tell you my name." "Names are data. Data is survival." An Ithac stepped from the shadows, if you could call them steps. It moved like ink in water, tall, sinewy, wrapped in semi-transparent fibers that glowed faintly. "We wish to offer an understanding," it said. I didn't trust them, but I listened. The Ithac told me what no one else dared. The Dominion was afraid, not of Earth's weapons, but of our mindset, our refusal to bend, our willingness to die just to make a point. "That is not strategy. That is infection," the Ithac said. "It spreads. Others see. Others begin to resist. You are dangerous." I didn't smile, but inside, I took that as the highest compliment. The Ithac offered intelligence, Dominion fleet locations, supply lines, weak systems, in exchange for protection. "From what?" I asked. The thing rippled. "The Dominion does not forgive embarrassment." So even their allies were on thin ice. Good. We returned to Earth with terabytes of data, most of it locked behind alien encryption so dense it fried 3 of our servers. But what we could read was gold. We now knew of 6 supply convoys moving through a trade ring called Velnar Drift, mostly unguarded, protected by auto turrets and cowardice. Lancer called me in again. "We're hitting them, hard. This is your next target." I didn't hesitate. I gathered the hounds, including the rookies who'd survived Carzul and had since earned their scars. Briggs, still recovering, insisted on coming along, metal plates now grafted into his face. "I'm uglier, sure," he said with a grin, "but I'm still meaner than hell." We launched within the week. This time our ship was better, faster, built from scrap Dominion tech and human ingenuity. We called it the Grave Dog, and it howled through space like it had something to prove. We hit the Velnar Drift at mid-cycle, when Dominion patrols were weakest. Their arrogance worked in our favor. They didn't think we'd come back so soon. They thought Earth would sit and analyze the last attack like good little primitives. They were wrong. We struck with fury, boarding, breaching, stealing. We didn't destroy the first convoy. We took it, turned the Dominion's own supplies into our tools. Then we booby-trapped the second and let it return home. When it detonated, it took out a defense platform. The third one we left intact, just stripped its engines and carved a message into its hull in a dozen languages. "You started this. Earth will finish it." The message went viral across galactic networks. And that's when things really changed. Rebel factions, once silent, began to stir. Planets the Dominion had ruled for generations started showing signs of unrest. Small at first, protests, sabotage, but growing. The fire was spreading. And Earth? We were becoming something else, something more than human, not evolved, not enlightened, just angry, and the galaxy was finally listening. We thought the worst threat was behind us. The Dominion had retreated, the galaxy was watching, and Earth finally had momentum. That's when the knife went into our back. It started small, comms delays, distorted intel from our allies in the Ithac network, unexplained reroutes of supply lines through dangerous sectors. At first, we blamed internal glitches, Dominion interference, or sheer logistical mess. But I knew better. You don't grow up watching men die in wars and not smell betrayal before it's declared. Lancer confirmed it 2 weeks later. The briefing room was colder than usual. The overhead lights flickered like they didn't want to show what was coming. He placed a cracked data pad in front of me, fingers trembling slightly. "You need to see this, Maddox." The transmission was grainy, but the faces were clear. Ithac diplomats, sitting with Dominion envoys. Not prisoners, not captives, partners. "Ithac sold us out," I said, staring at the screen like it might change. "After everything." "They played both sides from the start," Lancer growled. "Information traders don't bet, they diversify." They had given the Dominion Earth's expansion routes, tactical protocols, and even the locations of our hidden launch facilities, all for one promise: protection from the war humanity had unleashed. "They think we're the real danger now," I muttered. "Not the Dominion." "They're not wrong," Lancer said, "but they forgot one thing." I looked up. "What?" He smiled coldly. "We don't forgive." The decision came fast. No hearings, no negotiations. Earth Command, unified under a wartime council now, authorized the mission. Codename Ashfall. My hounds would strike the Ithac Nexus, their central data vault, not just to destroy it, to erase them, their memories, their secrets, their power. Gone. We didn't take prisoners. The Gravedog launched with 40 fighters and 3 support craft. We had new tech, cloaking rigs, kinetic shields, nanite grenades that could eat through a wall in under 2 minutes. Earth had evolved again, and we didn't care about the rules of alien war. The Ithac Nexus orbited a pulsar near the Dren line. It wasn't a fortress. Why would it be? The Ithac believed their neutrality was protection enough. That was their first mistake. We dropped in fast and hard, bypassing their outer security with a Dominion access code they had given us 2 months ago. Sweet irony, the interior was pulsing with data threads, glowing nerves stretching through the station. Dozens of Ithac watched us descend, blinking with their oversized eyes. Some tried to speak. I shot the first one through the throat. "This is retaliation," I said over the loudspeakers. "Earth speaks only once." We tore through them. They didn't fight. They pleaded, offered new deals, begged to explain. But we weren't diplomats anymore. The data vault was located deep in the station's spine, protected by a biometric key embedded in a high-tier Ithac leader. I dragged him by the collar, his translucent skin flickering with fear. "Your species knew what we were," I told him. "You just thought we'd be someone else's problem." "Ithac survive by knowing," he cried, "not killing." "You should have stayed out of it," I said, and pressed his hand to the scanner. The vault opened. Inside, data pulses blinked like stars. Centuries of secrets, blackmail, military positions, bribes, double deals. It was the nervous system of an entire galactic shadow network. Grant's virus did the rest. 10 seconds after upload, the files began melting, code collapsing like wet ash. We left before the station could scream. By the time Dominion patrols arrived, there was nothing left but drifting wreckage and a black box repeating one phrase in human tongue. "Earth remembers." But betrayal never ends clean. 3 days after the mission, we lost contact with the Arctic Forward Command. Gone. Not attacked, taken. Surveillance footage showed cloaked figures breaching the facility, using weapons that bent light and burned cold. Not Dominion, not Ithac. Something new. A third faction. They hadn't taken sides before. They hadn't appeared on any radar. We didn't even have a name. Until now. The footage ended with a voice, calm and inhuman. "Earth has passed the test. We now come to measure your limit." I looked at Lancer across the table. He didn't blink, didn't breathe. "Another enemy?" I asked. "No," he said, voice raw. "Something worse." I had faced war before. I had seen friends blown to ash, watched enemies drown in their own blood, stared into the empty eyes of civilians caught in crossfire. But nothing, not the Dominion, not the traitor Ithac, not even the burning skies of Carzul, felt like this. This was different. This was quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest before a storm hits, the unnatural stillness that screams louder than explosions. We still didn't know who they were. All we had was a name, decrypted from the transmission left on the scorched remains of the Arctic Forward Command. The Harrow. Not a race, not a government, a presence. The footage from the Arctic site was grainy, almost corrupted by design. But you could see them, silhouettes like humans, only stretched, cloaked in layers of bending light. They didn't walk so much as drift. Their weapons weren't visible. They didn't need them. One man dissolved just by being near them. We pulled everything we could from the site. Nothing was left of the garrison. No survivors, no bodies, no blood. Just one last message carved into the floor by someone, maybe the last man standing. "They are not here to fight. They are here to decide." I gathered the hounds again. By now we were legends. Ghosts, the kind of team alien mothers used to scare their spawn into obedience. And that suited me just fine. I didn't care about reputation. I cared about answers. We traced the Harrow's origin to deep space probes that had picked up a subspace rupture beyond the edge of Dominion territory. A tear in the fabric of space that shouldn't have existed. No gravity, no radiation, just a void pulling at everything around it, like the galaxy itself had been punctured. Grant called it an anomaly. Lancer called it a goddamn omen. I called it a lead. We launched from the old Kodiak base in Siberia. Our ship, Once the grave dog had been rebuilt again, sleeker, angrier, armed with weapons even we didn't understand. Some of it was based on stolen Dominion tech. Some of it came from reverse-engineered Harrow debris, what little we had from that Arctic mess. We called the new ship the Wound. Fitting, really. It didn't take long to reach the breach. It hung in space like a mouth frozen mid-scream, a jagged spiral of darkness rimmed with whispering light. As we approached, every sensor went dead. Our HUDs flickered. Comms scrambled. One of the rookies puked in his helmet from the pressure before we even crossed the edge. And then, we were inside. But not in space. Not really. The stars were wrong. The gravity felt inverted. We floated through what looked like shattered glass, each shard reflecting different versions of our ship. Some whole, some destroyed. In one, I was floating dead inside the cockpit. In another, I was smiling, but with black eyes. "What the hell is this?" Briggs whispered beside me. "No clue," I muttered, "but keep your guns warm." The Harrow didn't greet us. They pulled us. Our ship was dragged slowly toward what looked like a station, except it wasn't built. It had grown. A hive of spiraling architecture constantly shifting, as if afraid to be understood. I felt my heart beat slow unnaturally. Not fear. Something worse, something primal. We disembarked in silence. No gravity, no lights, just a presence. And then they spoke. Not with mouths, not with minds, but with memory. Each of us began to relive our worst moments. Briggs dropped to his knees, sobbing. I saw his daughter, the one he lost in the Nevada quarantine zone. She was crying, reaching for him, but every time he tried to touch her, she decayed. Turned to ash. Grant collapsed, clutching his ears. "They're inside, Cole! They're in my goddamn head!" I stood my ground. I had no kids, no wife, nothing left to haunt me but war. So that's what they gave me. I saw every mission I'd ever run, every life I ended, every innocent I didn't save. They made me feel it. Not just see it. Feel the terror, the pain, the betrayal. They wanted to see if I broke, but I didn't. I growled through the pain, through the guilt, and I shouted at whatever was watching. "You want to measure us? Fine. Then look. Look at everything we are, every mistake, every fight, every drop of blood. You think we're monsters? Good. So are you." Silence, and then form. A figure appeared. Not alien, not Harrow. A human. Me. But older. Eyes empty. Armor scorched. It walked up to me, slowly, and spoke in my voice. "We are not judging your strength. We are judging your right to exist." I stared it down. "Then judge this. We didn't ask for this war. You want morality tests? Go talk to the Dominion. We survive, we fight. That's who we are." The figure nodded. And then the truth came. The Harrow weren't a species. They were a fail-safe. An ancient race, long dead, had built them to observe rising civilizations, to determine who would ascend and who would be cleansed. We were next in line. They feared corruption, chaos, the echo of me said. They feared what they became. So they left us behind to do what they could not, end threats before they spread. "And what do you see in us?" I asked. "Uncertainty. They didn't want to destroy us, not yet. But they would, unless we proved we were something more than rage and retaliation. I didn't make a speech, I didn't cry, I told them the truth. We're not perfect, we're not peaceful, but we adapt. You've seen our wars, you've seen our pain, but look closer. We didn't crumble. We rose, every time. That's what makes us human. Not the blood we spill, but the way we keep standing." They said nothing. The Harrow faded. We awoke on Earth orbit 3 hours later. No explanation, no warning. Just one message burned into the hull of the Wound. "Not yet." After we returned from the breach, the world looked different. The skies were the same. The cities were still battered from Dominion strikes, still half-powered and crawling with fear. But something had changed. Not out there, in the stars. Here, in us. The Harrow hadn't killed us. They hadn't even attacked. But somehow that was worse, because they'd seen everything. They'd peered into the pit of our species and decided we weren't worth ending. Not yet. And that kind of mercy? That kind of delay? It meant judgment was still coming. We just didn't know when. Lancer called a global summit 2 days later, not just military brass and politicians. Scientists, historians, psychologists, priests, engineers, even artists. Everyone who had shaped the human story. They all came to the underground complex in Iceland, seated around a cold metal table while screens lit up with star maps, data feeds, and that one word, pulsing in crimson. Harrow. They don't care about dominance, I told the room. They don't care about territory. They care about trajectory. One of the biologists nodded slowly. Like a virus, they scan for mutations, dangerous ones. Or potential ones, Grant added. If we're heading towards something that could destabilize the galaxy, they erase us. Preemptively. The president, or what was left of him after surviving 3 assassination attempts and losing half a lung in the London strike, leaned forward. So how do we convince them we're not a threat? The answer didn't come from a general. It came from a quiet voice near the back, Dr. Eliza Rowan, a linguist who'd spent years decoding alien communication structures. She stood slowly, eyes locked on a stream of Harrow pattern data. We don't convince them, she said. We prove we're more than what they fear. We prove we can build. Build what? I asked. A future, one that isn't just fire and vengeance. The silence that followed was heavy, because she wasn't wrong. We'd won our victories with brutality, cunning, and sheer refusal to die. But that wasn't a future. That was survival. We needed to show them something more. Something that said, we belong here. Lancer laid it out in cold terms. We have 3 months, maybe less. Then the Harrow will decide. How do you know? Someone asked. He tapped a screen. On it, images of the moon, our moon, lit up. New craters, not from meteors, from landing gear. Harrow probes were already watching. They weren't waiting to be impressed. They were collecting evidence. The initiative was named Project Beacon. It wasn't a weapon. For once, Earth wasn't building a death machine. This was something else entirely. A city. But not just any city. Not another concrete jungle or technological marvel made to flex muscle. This would be a collaboration. Human minds, alien materials, from Dominion tech we had reverse engineered, and a focus not on dominance, but unity. It would float. Literally, a massive orbital habitat tethered to Earth's gravitational edge, visible from the surface. A beacon in the sky, sending a message. We aren't just destroyers. We create, too. The world came together for it in a way that shocked even me. Countries that couldn't stand each other during peacetime now traded engineers, shared resources, pooled satellites. Even the civilian population pitched in. Builders, artists, coders, welders. For the first time in generations, Earth wasn't just fighting a war. We were building a legacy, and I was put in charge of protecting it. Because not everyone believed we should be making peace. Resistance came fast, from within. Groups calling themselves the Red Veil, Purists, and Old World Faith all rose up in fury. To them, the Harrow weren't judges. They were invaders. And Project Beacon wasn't a symbol of hope. It was surrender. These things came to measure us, one Red Veil manifesto read. Let them choke on the blood we've spilled, not the handouts we offer. Briggs and I were tasked with dismantling the worst of them. Urban firefights in burned-out cities, shipyard bomb threats, underground cells loaded with suicide drones. We handled it, quietly, without glory. But every time I looked at Beacon rising in orbit, glowing brighter each night, I felt something strange in my chest. Not pride, not relief, something closer to fear. Because what if the Harrow didn't care? What if no matter what we built, how we unified, how we struggled to evolve, they'd already made up their minds? I voiced that to Rowan one night, while watching a live feed of Beacon's inner dome being installed. She sipped her tea without looking away. "They haven't," she said. "If they had, we'd be gone." I frowned. "Then why keep watching?" "Because maybe—" She paused. "Maybe they're not measuring us against perfection. Maybe they're just trying to see if we can change." I didn't respond. Not then. But I thought about it. A lot. 2 weeks before Beacon's completion, the Harrow finally acted again. A ship. One. Silent, black as the void, drifting down into Earth's upper orbit like a drop of oil into clear water. No weapons, no signals, but we all knew what it was. Judgment. I was called in. Lancer was already waiting on the platform near Beacon's lower hull. He didn't look nervous. He looked ready. "They're here," he said. I nodded. "You want me to lead?" "Number I want you to witness." The Harrow ship opened, not with engines or hatches, but like fabric being torn. From it came 5 figures, not humanoid, not organic, shapes that bent light and memory. I couldn't even look at them directly without feeling a sharp stab behind my eyes. Rowan stepped forward. No weapons, no speech, just a gift. A small crystalline orb containing Beacon's entire build data, architecture, philosophy, art, even conversations between engineers. Not just what we'd made, but why we made it. She placed it on the platform floor and stepped back. The Harrow examined it. No words. Then one turned to me. The voice came again, not in sound, but in memory. "Do you understand what you've built?" I swallowed. "A chance." "For who?" I didn't blink. "For all of us." There was a pause. Then the Harrow stepped back into their ship and vanished. No message, no verdict, just absence. That was 3 days ago. Beacon is online now, orbiting high, broadcasting human music, mathematics, poetry, and engineering in every known galactic frequency. A city in the sky. But Earth still waits. Because silence isn't safety, and judgment isn't over. It never was. The world waited. 3 days of silence since the Harrow vanished. No message, no signal, not even a flicker of subspace distortion. Just that single encounter. Brief, chilling, and undecipherable. The orbital city beacon now shimmered above the Earth like a silent guardian. It pulsed with light every dusk and dawn, streaming encoded human knowledge and culture out into the galaxy. It was beautiful, breathtaking even. But beneath its glow, fear simmered. What if it hadn't been enough? I stood in the operations tower, staring out at the curve of the Earth. Below, humanity moved as it always had, arguing, building, dreaming, hating, surviving, all of it packed into that fragile blue marble hanging in an infinite void. Briggs leaned against the wall behind me. His voice was rough, tired. No one slept since they left. "Can you blame them?" I muttered. "We've done all we can," he said. "We built, we changed. Hell, even the UN shut up and cooperated for once. If they wipe us out now, maybe we never had a chance." I looked at him. "What if that was the point?" He frowned. "What? What if the test wasn't pass or fail? What if they just wanted to see if we tried?" Before he could answer, an alarm pulsed through the tower, low, deep, rhythmic. But it wasn't hostile. It was summoning. A Harrow ship had returned. This one was different, Larger, impossibly so. It didn't hover or glide. It arrived like a thought made real, and its presence bent the atmosphere around it. No weapons, no escorts, just one objective. Lancer called me personally. "They want you, Maddox." I didn't ask how he knew. I suited up. The shuttle ride to the Harrow vessel was shorter than expected. Too short. Time seemed different inside their presence, as if it bent to their will. The shuttle docked, not with force, but with acceptance. The hull merged into the ship like it had always been a part of it. Inside, I walked through a corridor of light. It had no walls, just memory. I saw flashes of my life, combat, laughter, rage, regret, the little boy I used to be, the killer I'd become. Then, the path ended in a chamber, and they were waiting. 5 of them again, formless, towering, whispering not in sound but in the weight of meaning. "You have built." The words filled the space around me. "You have bled. You have changed." I stood tall. "And?" A pause. "This is not judgment. This is inheritance." I blinked. "What?" They stepped aside, revealing an image suspended in a column of living light. A planet, not Earth, but familiar. It spun slowly, cradled by twin suns, lush, wild, covered in blue and green and gold. "This was ours," they said. "Long ago." I stared, heart pounding. "You want us to settle it?" "We want you to take our place." Silence. I wasn't ready for that. Not domination, not annihilation, succession. "You built the Harrow," I said slowly, "to decide who would come next." "We failed to balance fire with creation," they answered. "We burned too brightly. So we left ourselves behind, as judges, as reminders. And if we had failed, you would have been erased, rewritten, made useful." I swallowed hard. "But we didn't. No." They moved, revealing a second image. Beacon, shining, cracked in places, still building, still transmitting. Imperfect, but striving. That was it. That's what they wanted. Not perfection. Effort, the will to rise from blood and wreckage and try again, even when the odds were against us, especially then. "You think we can handle this?" I asked, nodding at the alien planet. "What makes you so sure?" Their answer was cold and honest. "We are not." A pause. "That is the final test." I didn't know what to say, and maybe that was the point. This wasn't a moment for speeches. No heroism, no medals, just choice. They faded, one by one, into light, and with them the ship itself dissolved. No thrusters, no movement, just gone. I was back in the shuttle, alone. 3 weeks later, Earth received new coordinates, not from a human source, but from deep subspace. The Harrow planet, charts updated, probes launched, and every nation on Earth, for once, came to a single agreement. We weren't invading. We were inheriting. A delegation formed, scientists, builders, soldiers. I led the first team, not to claim, but to learn, to plant something, maybe a city, maybe a garden, maybe a new beginning. We called the world Resonance, not because it answered back, but because it remembered. Humanity isn't perfect. We never were. We lie, we rage, we kill when afraid, and build only when desperate. But when the stars looked down and asked who we were, we stood tall, and we answered with blood, with fire, and finally with hope. Not for peace, but for continuance. That was the test all along, and we passed it. Barely. They say history is written by the victors, but what they never say, what no one tells you, is that the victors don't always feel like winners. Not really. Years passed. Beacon remained in orbit, pulsing brighter than ever, now a nexus for science, diplomacy, and reflection. No longer a symbol of desperation, now a monument to survival. A reminder that Earth had been tested and had not only endured, it had been chosen. But not all wounds heal clean. The Harrow were gone. Erased, dissolved, or perhaps simply returned to the deep galactic silence they once emerged from. No trace of them remained, except for a planet, Resonance, now marked on every star map in every major system. It became the heart of a new age. Settlers arrived in waves, not just soldiers and leaders, but thinkers, wanderers, the disillusioned and the hopeful. People seeking something Earth no longer gave, a beginning. We didn't colonize it like conquerors. We grew into it, and it grew into us. The cities were strange, part alien, part human, all tentative, as if even the buildings were still unsure whether we belonged. But life flourished there. Children were born under twin suns. Crops from Earth adapted. New species were discovered. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And I stayed out of it for a while. Cole Maddox, Warhound, Relic. Whatever they called me now, I didn't care. I never wanted medals. I never wanted history books. I just wanted quiet. And after all we'd done, all we'd lost, I had earned at least that much. But peace never lasts forever. Not in full. Briggs visited once every year. Half his face was still a scarred mess, and he wore it like armor. He was helping run the Peace Guard, Earth's interstellar peacekeeping force, built to prevent the kind of ignorance that nearly got us wiped out. We drank whiskey on my porch on Old Mars Outpost 3, where I'd built a small home in the dust. Quiet enough to forget the galaxy. Loud enough to remember who I was. "You ever think about them?" he asked one night. "The Harrow." "Yeah." I nodded. "Every day." "What do you think they're doing now?" I stared at the red horizon. "Watching." Because that's the truth no one wanted to say out loud. The test never really ends. The Harrow may be gone, but their creators? The ones who built them? Maybe they were still out there, sleeping in the void, waiting for our next move. Earth had passed one trial. That didn't mean we were safe forever. But we were no longer alone either. Alien species who once feared us began to reach out. Carefully. Some offering trade. Some offering warning. A few, timidly, asking for help. They had seen what we did to the Dominion, what we survived from the Harrow. And for the first time in the galaxy's long, bloody history, humanity was no longer at the bottom. We were a variable, unpredictable, dangerous, essential. In time, schools taught what happened like it was a story. Children learned about Beacon. They learned about the breach. They memorized the day Earth was judged and found worthy, not for its kindness, not for its intellect, but for its effort, its refusal to give up. But what they didn't teach, what they couldn't, was what it felt like. The smell of burning steel over New York, the sound of alien weapons ripping through human bone, the terror of facing something you couldn't fight, and standing anyway. They could teach the facts, but not the fear. That belonged to men like me, and it always would. Years later, I stood on Resonance for the first time. The air was different, fuller. The gravity was softer, like the planet welcomed us. The skies were always orange at dusk, turning deep purple when the moons rose. A boy approached me, maybe 10 years old, messy hair, stubborn grin. "You really fought the Harrow?" he asked. I nodded. "Were you scared?" I kneeled beside him. "I was terrified." "But you didn't run." "No," I said. "I didn't." He smiled, then ran off to chase his friends under a sky Earth never gave him. And in that moment, I understood. The Harrow didn't want to see us perfect. They wanted to see us try, and that child, he was the answer. So here's the truth, written now in quiet, not for glory, not for fame. Just so someone remembers. Earth was tested. Humanity was measured. We were found dangerous, flawed, unfinished, but worthy. Because when the stars asked who we were, we answered not with silence, but with beacon fire. And in the darkness between galaxies, something very old listened. And for now, It let us be.